got a point, so please bear with me. According to Wikipedia, Texas A&M is a co-educational public research university located in College Station. It's the 6th largest university in the U.S. and the largest in Texas. It was the first public institution of higher education in Texas, opening October 4th, 1876, with 40 students and 6 faculty members as the Agricultural and Mechanical College of Texas. In contrast, the University of Texas opened in Austin 7 years later in 1883. The Texas legislature renamed the school Texas A&M University in 1963. A&M no longer stands for Agricultural and Mechanical. A&M stands for A&M. In the late 1880s, Texas A&M was saved from closure by its president, Lawrence Sullivan Sully Ross, a former governor of Texas and a well-respected Confederate brigadier general. By 1918, during World War I, 49% of all graduates of A&M were in military service, more than any other school. In early September of 1918, the entire senior class enlisted. Over 1,200 former students served as commissioned officers. In World War II, the college produced 20,229 combat troops. Of those, 14,123 Aggies served as officers, more than any other school and more than Annapolis and West Point combined. 29 Aggies earned General Stars. The new Memorial Student Center honors the university's 7 Medal of Honor recipients. Since 1876, 225 Aggies have served as generals or flag officers. A&M hosts a broad range of research with ongoing projects funded by NASA, the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation, and the Office of Naval Research. The school ranks in the top 20 American research institutes in terms of funding and has made notable contributions in the sciences, including animal cloning and petroleum engineering. In the fall of 2011, enrollment at A&M surpassed 50,000 students. A&M consistently ranks among the top 10 universities each year in the enrollment of National Merit Scholars. Among the Aggie family, Paul Bear Bryant coached, Lyle Lovett strummed, astronauts William Paley and Michael Fossum learned to fly, and Rip Torn acted. George Gay Jr. was the sole survivor of Torpedo Squadron 8 at the Battle of Midway. Representative Louis Gohmert continues to faithfully serve East Texas in Washington. According to Texas Monthly, the school's history instills in students the idealized elements of a small town life: community, tradition, loyalty, optimism, and unabashed sentimentality. A&M builds a foundation. The most visible tradition among seniors and former students is the wearing of the Aggie ring. Aggie Muster is held annually on April 21st, the anniversary of the Battle of San Jacinto, to honor any current and former student who died during the previous year. During World War II, while under assault from the Japanese, 25 Aggies mustered on parade order. Students who died while enrolled at Texas A&M are also honored at Silver Taps, a ceremony held when necessary on the first Tuesday of every month. Silver Taps is a beautiful ceremony, one I wish was never needed. Midnight yell practice is world famous. During freshman orientation, even the parents of incoming Aggie students are expected to attend class at midnight to learn to yell properly. Since 1909, A&M students have built a large bonfire to celebrate their burning desire, and I can't say this because we're in church, but to beat the heck out of the University of Texas, or more appropriately, lowercase TU, as it should be pronounced. Ironically, in 1999, 12 Aggies died when the bonfire collapsed. Ironic because Aggie football fans are called the 12th man, meaning they're there to support the 11 players on the field, willing to enter the game if necessary, to symbolize their readiness, their desire, and their enthusiasm. The entire student body stands throughout the game. The tradition began on January 2nd, 1922, at the Dixie Classic, where A&M played Center College. A&M had so many injuries in the first half of the game that Coach Dana Bible feared he wouldn't have enough men to finish the game. He called into the stands. E. King Gill responded. Although he didn't play, his readiness symbolized the willingness of all Aggies to support their team to the point of entering the fray. A&M won 22-14, with Gill the only man standing on the sideline. On Saturday, redshirt freshman Johnny Football Menzel, DeMontre Moore, Ryan Swope, and Mike Evans will lead the Aggies against BCS-ranked #1 Alabama's Crimson Tide. The Aggies are currently ranked 15th, but have the #1 offense in the SEC. During their first year in the league, they've only lost to #7 Florida and #9 LSU, games in which both games they lost rather than were beaten. My hope is that A&M beats the heck out of Alabama. But even if they don't, they'll still be Aggies. They'll still get up the next morning and go back to work. They'll know who they are, what they stand for, what their foundation is. They'll know that a single victory or defeat on the playing field, in battle, or even at the election booth doesn't define them. Will defeat define us? If so, either Grassroots America, We the People, hasn't been doing its job for the last 3.5 years, or you haven't. I haven't. I have 2 friends, known them for over 20 years. One of them, as a captain, when the bird colonel was fired in Riyadh, took over and was the primary architect of the air campaign for Desert Storm. He's a smart man. But he didn't vote in this election. He didn't vote because Mitt Romney was so moderate. I have the other friend, again, very smart man. He didn't vote because Mitt Romney was a Mormon. Grassroots America, We the People did not fail them. I did not fail them. They failed America. They have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility. And it's not enough to rest on your laurels. If a single defeat doesn't define you, if you know who you are, if you know what your foundation is, after Tuesday, we're entitled and we deserve it and we can take a moment. We can re-establish our bearings. We haven't changed, but we re-establish who we are when we move out. There's still work to be done. Our job just got more difficult, but also more critical as Pastor Solly said. Time to start again. Shake it off and let's go on. JoAnn. Have the pledges that we had. We are still Americans. We are still Texans. We pledge our allegiance to the country, not necessarily to the administration, but we pledge to those who came before us, and we promise to those who are coming after us to keep it strong. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And to Texas.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. We have already cheered. We are the people. Back to business.
Hello, classrooms. And for those who didn't get here early, Pastor Solly delivered a great and encouraging message to us. Thank you, Pastor. And I told Pastor Solly that as he's out there on the golf course playing golf today, there's some golfers in this city that are retired businessmen that ought to know better than spending all their time on the golf course. So I've asked him to recruit those golfers for Grassroots America with the People. They need to be constitutional conservatives, and they need to love liberty. That's the only criteria.
I'll look for them.
All right, thank you. So we've already had prayer to that. I want y'all to think that we've abandoned that most important thing. I can tell you all that I'm so glad that you're here today. Because, you know, liberty and the pursuit of liberty is shut up in my bones. And I can do this without you, but I'd rather not. I'd rather get to come here on Friday and see all of you. Because I've been hard-headed and stubborn for, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, almost 54 years. And there's no change in this girl, I can tell you. And the worst thing that anybody can possibly tell me is, you can't. Because I will move heaven and earth to prove you wrong, okay? All right, so let me tell you a couple good things before I introduce Michael. On Monday, we are planning a press conference, and it will be at 11 o'clock. It's going to be at the Tyler Chamber of Commerce building in the General Code room. And this is a brand new exercise for our community, and it will cause people to start talking. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be there. If you'd like to show up, I'd love to have you there. We are uniting with members of the local NAACP to form a coalition that is called No More Excuses Tyler ISD. And we're going after them on the lack of academic performance, and we're going after them on the lack of discipline and the lack of respect for teachers in our school district. They contacted me, they heard me speak at a school board meeting several months ago. I don't remember when now, because I don't go that much. You guys know that I attended school board meetings for 13 years. And so now I just don't have any tolerance for that. We've got a great watchdog committee that does that. I meet with the superintendent and the board when they ask me to, and they're the ones that do the calling. And I will tell you, I am frustrated with that school district. And so Monday they're going to have something new to think about, because never in this community have members of the NAACP reached out to work with conservatives in this community because we agreed on something. Now, I'm going to tell you, we are not going to agree with them on every issue. That is just not going to happen. But we're going to work together on this. I will tell you, their hearts are just like ours are. They're tired of spending with no results. And so I'm going into this prayerfully. I've met with them several times, and they are absolutely wanting very much to work with us on this project. So I will say this: if you attend the meeting and you introduce yourselves to these gentlemen and ladies, please don't push the entire conservative agenda at them all at one time. All right? We need a little bit of self-control here with this, okay? Because I don't want you to scare them off. Okay, we're going to work on areas that we can agree on, and hopefully we're going to conduct ourselves in such a way that we'll have an opportunity to persuade them to see our point of view on other matters. Because we have to be in the persuasion business, folks. You know, the way I talk to you all is not necessarily the way that I talk to somebody when I'm trying to negotiate with somebody that doesn't see it the way I do. And I never tell them everything I'm going for at one time, right, Michael? All right. So, that's the first thing. The other thing I want to tell you, I haven't had a chance to talk to the Watchdog Committee, the TISD Watchdog Committee. There's a report that Comptroller Combs has put out, and Bob, you really need to make a note of this. It's called Your Money and Education Debt. And you can find it on the Comptroller's website. I'm having regular conference calls with her office. Her office has put out some extremely important reports lately. They're great to read. Becky and I are going to work on linking to those reports, Becky, so they're very easy to find, because the Comptroller has a lot of information on her website. This talks about everything from bond indebtedness, from your local public education institutions to community colleges and to higher ed. It also speaks about the cost of construction on schools, and it acknowledges that there's a wide variation in it, which is something we've been very concerned about in Tyler ISD, the cost per square foot of those schools. I've been talking to you all for quite some time about how important it is for Texas to be strong. Tuesday night made that even more important. I can tell you that the rest of this country can go to Hades, but we cannot let Texas go that way. And I will tell you, I'm not going to back down on any of the issues we've been talking about as far as spending is concerned. Michael just told me a few things. You know, Michael likes to tell me stuff that just about the business community wanting more revenue. Let me say this very clearly to you all. Last session, I had people come to me begging me to help them with legislation to raise taxes on liquor. I don't know what smart aleck put that in. I'm not trying to be governor, but I tell you what, I bet you if I wanted to be, I'd give somebody a run for their money. Very funny. We got a lot of wannabe comics in here. Trying to make me forget where I was. I had people last session trying to get me to say that I would help them to support raising taxes on liquor. And I said, no. Well, JoAnn, don't you think sin ought to be taxed? I said, let me tell you what I believe. I believe that the government, whether we're talking about the federal government or the state government, the last thing they need is more revenue. I don't care where it comes from, because if you keep giving them more money to spend, they will not do the right thing to cut spending where it needs to be cut. And I got to tell you, I mean, to hear Harry Reid yesterday say, well, in response to raising the debt limit, you know, we've done that before here, so we'll just do it again. Someday there's going to be a reckoning there, and we cannot have that kind of foolish thinking in our state, whether it's about new revenue. Let me tell you what's coming. Gambling. And what they're going to do is what we predicted. They know they can't pass it in the legislature, but they're going to want to let we the people decide. Let me tell you, even if you like to gamble, that's between you and your banker and your wife or husband and all, you know, and you paying your bills. That's your business. But I will tell you that the last thing Texas needs is more revenue. We need to cut spending, and we need to get our money directed to where it really needs to go, and that's to those core constitutional functions of state government that I keep telling you all about. Okay? So, why do we need a strong Texas? Well, we need it to be fiscally strong and physically strong. Because we've got to balance our budget, we've got to do it right, and one of the toughest things in Austin is going to be getting them used to the idea of having less federal dollars. They love pulling down the maximum of federal dollars. And Texas is no longer a donor state. We crossed that threshold this year. We get more now than we pay in. Okay? So that is not healthy for the state of Texas. We also need to rely less on the federal government because we need to be independent of the federal government as much as possible. If there's a sadder case in the world that shows you what happens to states when they depend on the federal government, you just look at New Jersey and New York. I mean, that's why I've been saying it is reckless to spend down that rainy day fund, guys. Because if we have some disaster here, the last thing Texas needs is Governor Perry or our state officials screaming out for Washington to come save us. Texas needs to save itself. And one of the ways that we need to protect Texas physically, your personal safety, and you do know, I'm reminding you, that when your elected officials take an oath of office, their main job is to protect your life, your liberty, and your property. It's not to see how many tax dollars they can dole out down there to special interests, or see how many more laws they can put on the books. They're down there to stop bad stuff from happening. Okay? And so one of the things we've got to do is we've got to emphasize with the legislature and our statewide officials is we've got to cut off the magnets that draw people here that are here illegally. Now let me say again, we support legal immigration. Right. But our social safety net costs are exploding. In California, the people who put Governor Moonbeam in office, those people just voted themselves 2 huge tax increases. While people and businesses are leaving California, and I tell you, it's great for Californians to want to come here, but we are not interested in those left coast values. Okay? So, when California really starts to slide off into the Pacific Ocean because they're completely bankrupt, they're going to be asking for a federal bailout. And I will tell you that we had better not have one congressman or one senator from the state of Texas that thinks it's okay for us, our tax dollars, to bail out California when people are too stupid to stop spending money. Okay? That's the next thing, is the bailout of stupid states.
Which one did you have in mind?
Well, that's a lot of them, apparently. Well, the blue start with those. The other thing is the security. We need to support law enforcement. I've come to know that our DPS is losing officers right and left. They're retiring early, and they can go work for Austin PD, for Houston PD, for Dallas PD. They can work for a lot of these city police departments for a lot less money. So I'm going to tell you right now, I'm still looking at it, but I'm going to be in support of making sure that we have the right level of pay that keeps strong people working for DPS. Because I'm going to tell you, we live in a dangerous, dangerous world today. And if there's ever a time that you need to stand behind law enforcement, it is today. And that is why you are also making sure that you exercise your Second Amendment right to help protect yourself. And by the way, and I'm not being smart aleck about this, I want to talk to some people about handguns. Seriously, any of you out there that can give me some good advice, I'm going to buy one with the laser sights on it because I don't have the time you guys do to go practice all the time. So when I pull one out, I want to make sure I got a red dot when I'm I'm serious. We have to run this business from other people here, so I didn't want to talk to you about that. But I'm just telling you that we need to get Texas focused on what our state should be doing and our eyes off of the foolishness. And so Michael was telling me that the business community thinks we need to add more incentives for the film people, from the Hollywood people who want to make movies here. I just got to tell you, that is a non-starter, Michael. And so Michael's going to come up here now. Michael's going to tell you about what happened in our state elections where the legislature is concerned. Michael is a great friend, a great colleague, and I will tell you, they hate to see Michael Quinn Sullivan coming every bit as much, or probably more still, but I'm in stiff competition with him. They hate to see me coming. Thank you, Michael.
I can only hope that eventually they hate to see me coming as much as they hate to see you coming. I had been very much looking forward to coming to Tyler because this is going to be fun. We're going to get to talk about the end of the Obama regime. It's going to be a very, very pleasant, happy time. And so, of course, when I roused myself on Wednesday morning and, stumble out to the kitchen and my kids are there having breakfast, and all of them looking beautifully dour, knowing that Dad wouldn't tolerate any joy or happiness on that day. My son, my youngest child, walks up and gives me a little hug, and he says, well, Dad, at least we still live in Texas. And so that was, I think I've raised the kids well, at least in that regard. Our organization, Empower Texans and Texans for Fiscal Responsibility, obviously we focus on state level issues. I'm going to pass around a couple of clipboards here, so if you would like to get on our snarky little email list, we'd love to have you on our email list. You can't go to a political event without sacrificing all of your privacy, I guess. And in that vein, we're nonprofit groups. Don't put your bank account number, PIN, and mother's maiden name on the back. I promise not to abuse you any more than Barack Obama will, which is quite the deal. It is very difficult to have a dump truck pull up on you and dump lemons on you and to try to remember what the recipe is for today, which is kind of what I think happened on Tuesday evening. I was last night in San Antonio visiting with what should be the happiest group of people on the planet, the South Texas Wildcatters. These are the independent oil and gas guys. They'd ask for kind of a election update kind of thing. So sure, and again, agreed to it, saying, well, we have to talk about how we're done with the Obama administration. Different message. And then looking at what the oil and gas industry, which has really been the cash cow for the state now for several years, it's doing very well. The oil and gas industry is looking at some really rough times over the next 4 years. You've got, just to give you a little example, going to be dealing with the legislative session, this session and the next, there are 12 federal agencies that are looking at hydraulic fracking, the process which you take oil and gas out of the ground. Anyway, that's the limit of my knowledge about how oil gets to my gas, into my car. But 12 federal studies. 12 federal agencies don't conduct studies unless they're planning on regulating. You have 12 federal agencies looking for new reasons to regulate the oil and gas industry. If that weren't enough, there are at least 100 species of animal, plankton, bacteria, whatever, that environmentalists have already flagged as being future endangered species that they'll be bringing forward to the appropriate agencies of the federal government over the next year or so. 100 new species and subspecies go on the endangered species list. And ironically, it just so happens that each one of these 100 endangered species all just happen to reside in places where there's oil and gas underground, and generally are only in states that are marked in the color red. So yes, that's the kind of fun that we can have coming out of the federal government. And not to mention just what we know is going to be happening now in the next 2 years of implementation of Obamacare. We've already heard of numerous businesses beginning the process of laying off and other things because now they're for sure going to be dealing with Obamacare. The costs are huge. So we have this horrible, dismal, abysmal picture at play at the federal level. And I don't mean to depress you any more than you probably are already on your own. But it's important for us to recognize where we are on the field, where we are on the battlefield, to know what the enemy forces are like. And I think that we are probably at a point where we do have to, as Texans, look at least a little bit at the federal administration as being not an enemy, at least highly problematic, because they have a very definite agenda contrary to the interests of the Lone Star State. If for no other reason than because Texas has made a mockery of them. Because Texas has, some ways purposefully, in other ways accidentally, done better than, quite frankly, all 49 or 56 or whatever the number of other states is. We've done better than this. We are at the high end of the employment charts. We're at the high end of the job creation charts. People are moving to Texas. People are still voting with their feet. Entrepreneurs, people seeking a better life, they're coming to Texas. That's pretty exciting. You know, back in the 1800s, people would hang signs on their cabins, GTT, gone to Texas. Well, we're doing it again. You know, people are leaving California, leaving New York, leaving New Jersey, people in places and coming to Texas. And quite frankly, those blue states don't like it. They don't like their entrepreneurs are kind of become the, you know, who's read Atlas Shrugged, who become kind of the Galt's Gulch of the real world. Now, I would suggest to you that that is not reason for us to be all uber giddy with excitement. You know, it's like being the least drunk person in the room when you are comparing yourself to other people. You know, California is sitting in the corner, drooling on itself and muttering about the good old days. You know, in Texas, we're kind of walking a sort of straight line and can probably pick our car out of the cars in the parking lot. You know, we're better off than California, still not safe to do good policy. And the challenges that we have before us as a result of the election have now been multiplied. That while in the past we were stumbling a little inebriated, to continue that analogy, through policy making and, you know, having lower taxes than the other states, having less government than the other states, that's not going to be sufficient. It's not going to be sufficient for us to continue to do right by Texans, to simply be better off than the other states, because the Obama administration and those other states clearly have all lost their minds. And they're going to be doing worse and worse and worse things. Whether it's Harry Reid talking about the need to raise taxes and expand debt ceiling, Greece, here we come. All those kind of things are bad and they're multiplying bad. So we have to make sure that in Texas, we're not just satisfied with merely being the last one off the cliff. We need to make sure that we're still climbing upward. And the way to do that is by doubling down on what we believe and know to be true. We believe and know to be true. Things that JoAnn hit on a moment ago. We first have to demand absolutely that state government stop chasing federal dollars. Stop chasing the federal money. It's not worth it. It's no longer really even money. It's the federal government taking their overdue Visa card and running it through a different ATM machine and getting more cash out of your great-grandchildren's pockets. It's no longer real money. It's beyond not even real money. It's fake money coming out of real debt. It's bad, bad, bad. We have to stop chasing the federal dollars. But all too often, our members of Congress, our state legislators, our city and county and school officials come to us and say, oh, we have to spend this billion dollars so that we can get the free federal money in. And it's our money anyway. We've got to get our money. And if we don't get our money, California will get it, or Oklahoma, or some other state I probably couldn't name or find on that. But one of those other places will grab our money. So let's go spend this $1 billion. And the state has done that perpetually. Your schools and your city and your counties, we are constantly doing that, chasing after federal dollars. The problem is, though, that you are not only spending federal money that doesn't really exist and contributing to the national problem, but you're creating new problems locally. We find it in healthcare, where for years, we all talk about Obamacare as if it's this new horrible thing. No, it's really not. Quite frankly, it was nice to see people wake up to the dangers of socialized medicine, or the reality of socialized medicine. But frankly, Obamacare was a very small step compared to what we've been doing for the last 40 years in healthcare policy. The Medicaid expansion a few years ago was equally as bad, yet very few people said much about it. The Medicaid work going on and in Texas over the past couple of years, it is destroying the state's budget. It has been bankrupting. It's only a third of the state budget. So we've allowed the chasing of federal dollars to define what we do as Texans. We have to stop that. And the second thing we have to do is recognize that while the rest of our country, the people who live in the other 49 states, by and large, have adopted a failed philosophy. They haven't adopted it, they have at least assented to it. Texans, Catholic, looking at our election results, we haven't yet assented to the failed philosophy as Texans. I'm not talking about the 150 members of the House, the 31 members of the Senate, Lieutenant Governor, Governor, Attorney General, Comptroller, all the pretty people in elected office who drive around and think they're very powerful. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the 25 million of the rest of us. Your fellow Texans believe on those things that have made Texas great, on the philosophy that drove our country to great heights. Your fellow Texans believe in these things. We did a poll of Texas voters, then now two of the past couple of months. The most recent one was incredibly encouraging. Both were encouraging. The last one, because it was right before the election, was very encouraging because we saw that your fellow Texans don't want new taxes. Absolutely, 70+%. Even self-described liberals don't want higher taxes in Texas. Okay. Your fellow Texans in the 68% range want to stop giving state tax dollars to Hollywood, to big business, to people who come up their hands up for corporate welfare.
across the board. Texans don't like that sort of thing. Texans agree with the proposition that we should cut the size of government rather than seek new revenues by overwhelming numbers. Only the most liberal of people think that you should probably do a mix of cutting revenue. That's phenomenal. When even the liberals in Texas are assenting to the correct values and principles. That's good. The problem isn't, though, with the 25 million of our fellow Texans. It's with the 181 divine godlike beings in the Texas legislature. That's where our problem begins. And quite frankly, where our problems will grow if you and I aren't careful. Because it would be very easy to, this weekend after Election Day, to go home and go, ugh, yuck, I'm done with this. Ugh. I'm glad that's over. I didn't do anything for 2 years. Because I would suggest to you that as citizens, participation in an election is the bare minimum that you can do. The only way you can do less is to not vote. And frankly, there are times when I wish that if someone isn't going to continue after the election day, that they wouldn't annoy me by participating on election day. Yeah. Because they vote, and then don't show up the day after. I have very little use for them. Because they fail to do the thing that you and I, as employers, have to do. If you think of our country, of our state, of our counties, our cities, our schools, as business operations, which is always a scary thing. I always get frustrated because I've got to run government as a business. No, run government as a government. That's different. But think of it as a business for a moment. If you're the owner of a hardware store, and you think of your job as the owner of the hardware store as to hire some employees and then walk away, how long will your hardware store be in business? About 14 seconds. That is the amount of time it takes you to start your car and back out of your parking place, and then it will be over. As an employer, as someone who owns it as a business owner, you have to be there before the first employee shows up, and you have to be there after the last one's gone. You have to make sure you're hiring diligently, and that while you trust them to carry out the jobs they're given, you verify. You hold them accountable. You do reviews. You ask difficult questions, even in the middle of the workday. That's what you and I do as responsible employers. That's what you and I do as responsible small business owners. That's the way we work. And that's how we should operate with our elected officials also. You and I have to be engaged. We have an obligation to be engaged. We have a requirement, I would suggest, in our system of government, to be as engaged after elections as before them. You and I have to be showing up during the act of governing, more so even than the act of campaigning. Because the act of campaigning might set a tone, but the act of governing changes people's lives. You and I have to be involved. And in this legislative session, there's going to be huge pressure on even our most right-thinking of legislators to do stupid, colossally insane things. The Texas Association of Business, the premier business lobby entity, an organization that you and I are looking at, they must be all conservatives, they're all business owners. All of them are rent seekers. Remember, economics, a rent seeker is someone who goes to government, asks for money so they can operate their business. That's what a rent seeker. A lot of these people tend to be rent seekers. But in the popular imagination, the Texas Association of Business is a conservative organization. And they were just yesterday standing before the Texas House of Representatives saying that we need to double your vehicle registration so we can put more money into transportation. That we need to put a new charge on your water meter so that way we can fund other people's water programs. They said that we also need to give more money to Hollywood because goodness only knows the liberals didn't have enough cash to give to Obama this time. They want more money going from your dollars to fund new movies that you and I wouldn't let our children go see. So That's one challenge. We also have the drum beats, the quiet, tap, 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 echoing through the legislature that, yeah, we're just not funding government high enough in Texas. All of our problems would go away if we would only spend a little more money. How much more money? In public education, there's a big lawsuit going on. A lot of school districts around the state are suing the state, saying the state isn't giving them enough money. Okay? And it was very fun to watch the filings from the school districts, because their first witness came up and said the problem was we're short about $4.5 billion. Well, the second witness came up and said, well, really, we're short about $6.5 billion. The next witness came up and said, to really fix education, you need about $8 billion more in public education. The last witness the school districts brought forward said to really make sure Texas has superior schools, we need another $12 billion. Thank heavens that was the last witness. There was like a bidding war between them. Who would say the highest number and keep a straight face? Because what we know from the data, what we know watching public education, it's not about the money. Absolutely, you need to pay teachers. Absolutely, air conditioning in school costs money. We get that. I'm not sure. Anarchists are, well, most of us are anarchists. Empress, not anarchist. That's what I'm in Texas, we have doubled per pupil spending over the last decade. Doubled per pupil spending. We've gone from less than $6,000 per child to now we're spending right on $12,000 per child per year in public education. And yet SAT scores are flat. Flat. No improvement, no change. I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of public education. But what we have found to be true is that more money doesn't equal a better education. More money just equals more money. And yet, your legislators are going to be beaten down day after day after day during the legislative session by your superintendents, by your school board members, by teachers, by well-meaning people in the community saying, oh gosh, we are just a few $1 million short here, and there are a few million, so if you could just go ahead and put a few billion more in the budget, that would help us out. And it's going to be relentless, day after day after day after day after day. You can be in Austin, you can be in the state capitol any day of the week, any time of the day, and throw a rock in any direction, and you will get someone who is there lobbying for more money, for more programs, for higher regulations. And where are you and I? We're too often not there. Yeah, and I hear that a lot. We're working. Somebody's got to pay the taxes. I'm so thankful that my ancestor, Benjamin Rush, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, didn't say, I'd really like to be involved in that whole rebellion against the king thing, but someone's got to be at home and pay the taxes. My gosh, my family really wants to go to Disney. I need a goodness, I've got to make money now so I can provide. That's where you and I have to start thinking about the cost of living. Which is more important to us? A strong, bright, free future, or one that's convenient? Convenience has a cost. Our brothers and sisters in Cuba, they get to wake up every day, go to work, they come home, they hope they have food for their kids, and they're comfortable. That's what they're used to. Not free. Not free at all. I'd rather be inconvenienced and free than be comfortable and live in tyranny. And I would suggest to you that those are the kinds of choices we are facing. Comfort or inconvenience, tyranny or freedom. That's where we're going in this country. Those are the questions we have to ask ourselves. It's not, I don't believe, overly dramatic. I'm often dramatic. not really dramatic though, when you look at the policies that have been implemented. You and I have to show up. You and I have to show up because there's going to be a constant clarion call in the Texas legislature to spend more, do more. We're hearing it from the left and we're hearing it from the right. The people of Texas don't want more spends. They don't want bigger government, they want smaller government. They want lower taxes. That's what every poll we've conducted shows. And yet, because you and I don't show up to reinforce the message with our elected officials, chances are it will happen. The very first vote of the legislative session is not in January when the legislators meet. You might think that. It stands to reason that the first vote would be the first day of the legislative session. I've often said that the first vote is the speaker's vote. And that's true. But it's also not true. The first vote of the legislative session will be next Thursday, a week from yesterday. The first vote of the legislative session will be next Thursday. It's on that day that the Legislative Budget Board will meet. Never heard of the Legislative Budget Board? Don't feel bad. You shouldn't have unless you're wanting to be more engaged in your government. The Legislative Budget Board is comprised of Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House. It's comprised of 4 members of the Senate and 4 members of the House. Now, interestingly, the members of the Senate and the members of the House are appointed by the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker, so it would save a lot of hassle if it was just the 2 of them. By trying to save on some chairs at the meeting, I guess. But anyway, you've got the Lieutenant Governor and his appointees, and the Speaker and his appointees, and they will meet to carry out their statutory obligation. Their statutory obligation to set the limit on government growth for the next budget. They will set the limit on government growth for the next budget. Because in Texas we have a spending limit. We have a spending limit that reads, the state government shall grow no faster than the state's economy. That doesn't sound too bad. Except that the second sentence says, and the legislature shall define government, economy, and growth. And so that's what they've kind of done. It's like giving a teenager whiskey and car keys. How many irresponsible things have you just done? And then you tell them, don't drive unless you think you haven't had too much to drink. How confusing is that? Crazy. But that's what we do with government. That's what we've done with government in Texas, which is why state spending really isn't as small as it is. Here's what the legislators limit themselves. And so they're going to meet next Thursday, and they're going to set the spending limit. In the past, the spending limit has always magically, remarkably, allowed for them to spend whatever they wanted to spend. It's amazing. It just so happened that the legislators who were writing the budget were the ones setting the limit, and so amazingly, the limit they pick provides enough money for them to do whatever they want to do, to take from our pockets. So the Legislative Budget Board will be meeting next Thursday to set the spending limit. They will probably, if they follow history, they will set a spending limit of 15, 16, 17%. That's generally done the past. 12%. They've done the past. A better limit is something that doesn't let the legislature set their own limit. A limit that is external to them. If my board of directors, when my actually it's coming up in 3 weeks, pray for me. 3 weeks I have my board meeting, a week after Thanksgiving. And my board will ask me, I wish my board asked me, I should say, Michael, how was your year? To which I would answer, my year was fantastic. You should pay me more. That is what I would say. Instead, what my board will actually say is, okay, Michael, these are the metrics we set for you at the beginning of the year. And we see that you've done this, not that. How did you want to keep your job anyway? You know, we did that kind of conversation because the limit was not set by the person being limited, but by something external to them. That's the way to limit things. And state government has never been limited in that way. And I suggest to you that limiting state government to the sum of population and inflation is a much better limit than letting legislators play around with semantics. And applying the entire state budget. And currently, we don't even limit the entire state budget. We lob off health and human services. A third of state spending is lobbed off. crazy. So the first vote of the legislative session will be next Thursday. And we'll have a hint of how the session is going to go. JoAnn and I would suggest not only should there not be an increase, you should decrease spending. Okay, that's where JoAnn would fall on the negative limit probably. But at a minimum, if they're going to say government needs to grow, JoAnn's going to shoot me. Look for a red dot. Pay attention. They will set a limit, and how low that limit is, how restrictive that number is, will tell us a lot about the legislative session. It will tell us how serious they are about doing when they govern what they promised when they campaigned. Because not a single Republican campaigned saying, I'm going to raise taxes. That no, a single Republican campaigned saying, I'm going to increase the size of government. Not a single Republican said, we're going to go in and reach deeper into your pockets. None of them did it. But if they set a spending limit higher than the sum of population and inflation, we will know that they weren't serious. And so you and I will know that we have our work cut out for us. But regardless of that first vote, the next most important vote that your legislators will take is the first vote on the first day of the legislative session in the Texas House, when they will vote on who the Speaker of the House should be. They will vote on whether or not we should have another 2 years of a moderate who wants to expand legalized gambling so that his family makes more money. We want 2 more years of a moderate who has less than conservative views on the life question. A speaker who said that we can't cut our way to prosperity. We need new revenues, is what he said. Okay? That. Or do we want a conservative who represents the views and the values of the 25 million Texans out there? I would just do the incumbent speaker, Joe Strauss, an affable fellow from San Antonio, Texas, very adequately represents the views of the lobbyists in Austin. I think that he is the perfect embodiment of what the lobbyists in Austin want to see happen in state government. I would suggest to you that he does not speak very well for 25 million Texans. I think it might be good for us to have conversations, maybe difficult conversations even, with the members of the Texas House. I've talked to a couple already. Well, I think I'm going to have to go with Joe because, we're used to it. Why don't you go tell your constituents that? And then you're peeling the tar and feathers off of your back. Let me know how that feels too. You need to have conversations with your guys. Have conversations with your members of the Texas House and ask them specifically and directly who they're voting for. And then hold them to it. The Speaker of the House is a very powerful position. The Speaker of the House appoints the committee chairs in the same way the Lieutenant Governor does. He appoints the committee chairs with no review. The legislators can't change it. And the committee chairs then have dictatorial power over their committees. There's no real discharge process. That means the committee chairs get to decide what does and doesn't even get a hearing, does and doesn't get a vote, does and doesn't move out to the calendars committee, and then from there move on to the floor. A lot of the things that we need done, that we want done, rests in the power of the hands of those committee chairs. You want bad legislation stopped? Always a good thing. You need committee chairs who are willing to kill it. You want good reforms to move forward? You need committee chairs who will allow it. Now, interestingly, the state Senate has gotten a lot more conservative out of this election season. The numbers have stayed the same, Republican and Democrat, but we had a lot better Republicans coming into the state Senate. Very encouraging. And fantastic men coming into the state Senate to change the gravity power. And for people who say that elections don't matter, I give you your lieutenant governor. Okay? Because your lieutenant governor, after the unpleasantness of the summer for him, he turned around and shook up the Senate committee chairman, appointing better, I'm not going to say great, but better people to very key positions, like State Senator Dan Patrick, one of the strong conservatives, now heading public education, the Committee on Public Education. Fantastic choice for our team. Tommy Williams, he was kind of borderline. It's better than we had, chairing finance committee. The list goes on. So if you ever want to get down the mouth about whether or not elections matter, just look at the state Senate in 2012, because they do matter. They do have an effect. It does start to change the way people behave and the way they act. So we have some bright spots ahead. The challenge though for us is going to be, we're going to allow the Texas House to continue to wallow in the unused conservative majority. And if we keep the current speaker, it's probably going to happen. So make phone calls to your legislature. Make calls to your friends who live in other legislative districts. Please don't call state reps in the Panhandle. Only call the people that you can vote for. They're the only ones who will listen to you, and then only maybe kind of. But call your friends who live in other legislative districts, have them call their state rep. Far more effective. Samuel Adams, one of our least appreciating founding fathers, besides brewing pretty good beer, he is most known, though, for having created committees of correspondence, where the small pockets of liberty-minded colonists exchange information outside the mainstream media. Sounds familiar? You and I need to be doing the same thing, reaching further and further out to our friends, extolling them about liberty and extolling about the very practical things they can and should be doing, like starting with these first couple of others in legislative session, so they can make phone calls and be engaged in the fight also. On the last day of April, last day of February, the Alamo in 1836 had sustained constant bombardment going into that first week of March. One of the last letters that William Barrett Travis wrote from the Alamo, just exhorting all Americans everywhere to come to his aid. But he was writing about the bombardment and said, "We woke that morning, he was pleased to see that our flag still waves proudly from the wall." This is a man who was facing certain death. He knew that the only fate that awaited him, absent people rushing to his aid from around Texas, was death. Santa Anna had made that abundantly clear by that point in siege. There's a great pride, what that was, but it was similar to it. I was waving from the walls, despite the bombardment, and he was willing to keep fighting. He died. Some of us will not be successful in our fights. But by continuing the fight till the literally the bitter end, Travis and his colleagues set the stage for a victory that came a month and a half later in the field of San Jacinto in an 18-minute battle. You and I persist. If we don't let ourselves in the first night of bombardment to be discouraged and wave the white flag, we can be comfortable. But we won't be victorious. I'd rather be victorious. And I hope that each of us will continue the fight. The fight that we started is one that we have to see through to completion. Whether we see it or not is not nearly as relevant as knowing that we're inspiring others to do so. We have lots of big challenges ahead this next few months of the legislative session and the next 4 years of our country. But I submit to you that the people of Texas want us to win, and you and I have an obligation to do so. Thank you for letting me be with you today. This is a very fair opportunity for me. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.